Today's presenter is Amy Strope, who is a master gardener here at Prince William, and she's going to talk about winter sowing. So Amy, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Just want to say welcome and preface this with a little bit that I am far from an expert on this winter sowing, but it's something that I've become very passionate about and learned about in the last few years. And I hope that maybe some of my interests will go off on you guys. I am a third-year master gardener in Prince William County. I've had 33 years of gardening experience. I'm always learning, so this is something that I hope I can share with you guys. Okay, so winter sowing. Alert, this is proceed with caution. This is a highly addictive process. I started out with just a few containers, and now I'm well over 100 containers of seeds every year. So what is winter sowing? It's a means of starting seeds in an outdoor mini greenhouse scenario. It uses the naturally occurring light and environmental conditions to germinate seeds and start plants. Some of the pros to this are space, efficiency, the variety of plants you can do, repurposing, time, and saves money. The scenario in the past, I would use grow lights to start my seedlings to take outside and put in my garden. And I was always very limited about how much space I had. This became a much more freeing means of growing and starting seedlings. So I'm not limited by space anymore. And I'm also using the natural resources, the light and the warmth of the environment. Variety of plants is, I think, one of the most freeing aspects of this process. Seed packets are very numerous compared to the type of varieties of plants that you can buy in your local stores. The success rate of new and different varieties have been much better for me than those that I tried indoors. Where to get seeds? Collect them from your own plants or other people's plants, trade them, purchase seeds. And one thing that I've done a lot, I started doing was using some of my old seeds. In the past, I wouldn't use the space up from my old seed. And now I'll just take a packet of old seeds and throw it in a container and see what happens. There's nothing to lose. Much more adventuresome as far as the types of plants I'm trying, again, because I'm not limited by the amount of space that I have. Types of plants that can be used, or that you can use this process on, especially natives, perennials, annuals, vegetables, and some shrubs and trees can even be started from seed using this process. Some of my successes that I had using this process are lavender, wave petunias, milkweed, delphinium, poppies, lobelia, and then last year, I started 16 types of tomatoes in 1 year, which is not something you can find at a box store for sure. This is ideal for native perennials that require cold stratification or scarification. Scarification is the outer layer that needs to be broken down on a seed to allow gases and moisture to get into the germ. The outdoor freezing and thawing process initiates this need for the seeds. And then the natural cold cycles provide the cold requirements for the warming of the seeds to crack through that protective coating. Some visuals here, some of the types of seeds I've used. The ones at the top there, cardinal flower and Joe Pye weed, I collected myself from my own plants. Other plant seeds that I've collected from time to time or purchased new. And again, a good variety of different types. These are some of the plants I planted last year. Alyssum, coleus, nicotiana, coriander. And here's my tomatoes I started last year, as well as 15 of the 16 types that I grew last year. It was quite fun to try some different varieties. Okay, so the repurposing. It's an excellent use of discarded containers that you'd normally send to the landfill. You're gonna try, what you need to use is a clear to an opaque container. Use what you have. Starbucks and other coffee shops are great locations to be able to get milk jugs. Our local Starbucks was very helpful with that. Sometimes they'll say no, but other times, sometimes it depends on who you talk to. So you're replicating a mini greenhouse. You need the light to come through. Vinegar jugs are another takeout containers, vegetable or fruit packaging. Things that have solid lids, you'll need to put holes in the top for venting. 2-liter or 1-liter bottles can be used. And ask your neighbors and friends, they'd be glad to help out saving some of these things for you, especially if you share the results with them. And then one thing I've done is I store my containers from year to year. So I've been collecting my, especially milk jugs, I've been collecting them. I'm on the 3rd year for some of them, and I don't have to save them all up each year. There's some of the different containers I've used in the past. I will say salad containers, you need to be a little bit careful that you're using seeds that don't have to have a lot of head space until they grow. So like tomatoes and peppers, other things, you may want to use containers that have higher head space so you get more growth out of them before you have to uncover them. Time, great time savings and time. Plants started and grown outside are already acclimated to the environment. They have good root growth and they have strong stems. So that whenever you go to transplant them into their final spots, they're already in very good condition. So basically you're just planting these, you're placing them, and you're watching the moisture, and it requires very little time after you've planted them. It's a freedom from care during the spring months. I know in the past, sometimes I would start my seedlings inside, and then if I was going to travel or something, which I know is not an issue this year, but if I was going to travel, I'd have to come up with a way to make sure that the moisture was maintained and the lights were still on. Once these are placed outside, you really don't have to fuss with them very much. And it's a very good way to use your winter months. Get started on the garden before you have outdoor chores to work on. There's also no hardening off of these seedlings. You know, they're already getting used to the climate outside, and so you don't have to take plants back and forth from inside to outside to be able to acclimate them and then transplant them. And this process saves money. Seeds are very much more cost effective than buying plants. A packet of seeds is probably, $2, while a packet of tomato plants is probably about $6 to $10, depending what size you get. It reuses the recycled containers instead of using purchased seed trays and peat pots. And it's a much lower, there is no electricity cost needed for grow lights and no special racks and lights required. Okay, so I pre-recorded a couple demonstrations. I'm hoping that these work well. We had a couple of little glitches, so I'm hoping that they run well. So I'm going to run the videos here in a second, but I will say, so some of the tools, just a close-up of some of the tools that I use, which is the rotary tool to drill holes. I mark my containers with this white marker, which is a paint marker. It's held up 2 years now, so that's not a problem for me. And then I tape up my containers with duct tape, but there's other means of doing that. Hi, I'm doing a demo on how to prepare jugs for a winter sowing application. So I'm going to show you real quick how easy this is. This is just a regular milk jug. I've been saving these most of the year. The way I normally do it is I use a Dremel with a screw bit on it, drill bit on it, and I will show you very quickly how I process these. I'm going to be putting holes in the bottom for drainage, And then I'm going to put a hole in the side here to allow me to cut it to make a hinge. So, do real quick. Okay, so I found that's probably the best tool I found to do this with. Other people have used hot awls, heated up awls and used it to melt through the plastic, and I've also seen people say that they use a hot glue gun to melt through and make the holes in the plastic. And then I just go ahead and slice an opening here. I always cut mine so that I can leave a hinge at the handle. It's the stronger part of the jug, and I pull it back. And now I have my processed milk jug. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I process these with soil. I have been using this Fox Farm Happy Frog potting soil, highly recommended by the winter sowers and a lot of people on Facebook. It is much more expensive than a lot of other potting soils. It is organic, and it does not include moisture control or fertilizers. So that is one of the things that are unnatural fertilizers. That's one of the things that a lot of people stress would be better to not include in your potting soil. But that being said, potting soil, use what you have, make up your own. You can make your own with potting soil, peat moss, and perlite is a nice combination. You want something fairly light, and basically, and it's not recommended to use seed starting mix, because seed starting mix dries out very quickly and it has no nutrients in it. So basically you want something that's going to allow the full growth process of the seedlings, because you're not transplanting them. They're actually going, until much later, you're actually going to let these seedlings grow up until the point that you're transplanting them into the garden. Okay, so usually what I do is take a few cups of the soil. This is very dry at this point. Sometimes I'll add moisture to it in advance, and other times I will just add the soil. I usually put about 3 inches in. I know some people that put much more, 4 inches. I think 3 inches works fairly well for me. And then what I'll do is I'll fill several of these up, and I'll put them in a container like this, and I'll fill it with water so that the soil absorbs the moisture through the bottoms of these. Or I can pour some water in on top of them. All right, thank you. Hey, good afternoon. So now I'm going to just show you how I finish up these winter sowing jugs. The other day I showed you how I prepared the jugs. I filled them with the potting soil and I damped it down. And now I'm going to go ahead and fill these up. I label them. The way I label them is just with a number. I'm showing you here. I've just been adding this number. I have these nice little paint sticks which work really well. I've used these for a couple years and the numbers don't come off. They don't wash away. I've also used these paint markers that I've picked up from time to time. But I also have heard of people putting tags inside of the containers, putting tape on the bottom of the containers with a labeling. However you think you want to do it. The biggest thing is Sharpies really apparently don't last in the UV light. So if you do use a Sharpie, make sure you're putting it on the bottom of a container, and then you can maintain your labeling. Or you can always guess when you see the plants come up. So today, this is January 21st. So today I'm starting a lot of my perennials that I expect need cold stratification. believe this is going to be a good enough amount of time to do that. Last year I started them in February, and I had plenty of time to get things started. So mostly what I'm starting today is milkweeds that I had and some other native perennials. So this particular one is a swamp milkweed. As you can see, I put about nine or so seeds in there, just spaced them out. And then I'm just going to, the soil itself is pretty damp. I watered it down and let it sit for a couple days. So, oops, so it's pretty wet. And now I'm just going to cover these just a little bit with some soil, not a lot. Tamp it down. And I'm sure you guys all know how to plant seeds. It's really not a whole lot different than what you would do. Oops, I'm not doing a good job videotaping here and working at the same time. And then, like I said, I number it. And then I right away been making a spreadsheet where I identify what I'm planting. And again, this is just my way of doing this. Lots of other people do it other ways. I found this was pretty good because then I could keep a lot of information throughout the year, like when they germinate and how much germination I get and so forth. And then what I'll do is I'll tape these up. I'll show you a quick picture of how I tape them up later, and then they get set outside. All right, talk to you later. Bye. Okay, so that's the end of the videos. Here I'm just going to show you a little bit closer how I've placed these seeds. So if it's a very small seed, a lot of times I'll just broadcast it across the top of the container. That's what's shown here on the left. This is Cardinalis, Lobelia cardinalis, very fine, small seed. And then I'll just tamp it down slightly. I don't even, it's that small a seed, you shouldn't cover it. It's just try to have the seed make contact with the soil. On the right, these seeds are a little bit larger. These are barrage seeds. I believe the packet says to plant them at a 1/2 inch depth. I won't go that deep. I'll just make an indentation in the soil, make a little hole, place the seeds, and just cover them up, and then mist the soil before I place them outside, before I tape them up. Here's 2 of the containers that I am now processing and taping. I use duct tape to tape up my containers. This year I'm trying out using a 1/2 width of duct tape by cutting it with a knife, scoring it with a knife, and that way I can make it go twice as far. I think it's working out okay. We'll see how it holds up in the weather. I've also seen people comment that they'll close the containers up with tie wraps and even just place them inside of each other, hoping that they stay together. Basically, you don't want the tops to blow off, and you want to make sure that the moisture is kept inside. I have been pretty happy using the duct tape though, because that's held up well for me. And then once they're taped up, you can place them outside. I usually try to put mine in a sunny spot, at least at the beginning. Make sure they get some warmth and sun most of these beginning months. And then what you're going to be looking for is condensation. If your jugs have moisture on it like this and good condensation, that means you've got plenty enough moisture inside of the jugs. Another way you can tell if you need more water, especially when it starts getting warmer, because sometimes the condensation will disappear, is just by picking them up, and you know how it feels whenever it's wet soil. If the weight of the jugs is too light, I can just tell by picking them up. It's like, oh, I need more water here. And then what I will do is get one of those bins like I showed at the beginning, fill that with water, and just place my jugs down inside of that so that the moisture will come up through the soil. And usually I can leave them in there about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's enough water for them to maintain the moisture. You probably could water them from the top at some point, but especially once things get moving, the blast of the water could probably disturb the seedlings a little more than you need to. I actually prefer to do it from the bottom. Labeling and tracking, I showed a little bit of this in the video. My personal preference is to use just a numbering system. That way I can reuse my jugs from year to year and just keep track of them on the spreadsheet with that number. Other people use a tag inside a container or on the bottom. And as I said before, just make sure you're not using a Sharpie on the top of the jugs, because that will fade. It's faded for me, like in just using it on tags in the garden. I don't like that process. Oh, here's just a snapshot of one of my spreadsheets, a little bit more, just an idea of some of the things that I capture, whether it's a perennial or if it needs cold stratification, how many seeds I put in each jug, when it germinates, just sort of to help me learn from my experiences. And then the fun part comes whenever you get to open up the jugs, the big reveals. Usually I'm finding I'm usually uncovering my jugs or opening them up in like April or May, depending on the plant. Sometimes if we get some really warm weather, it's better to open them up, let them get a little air, and then I'll just close the jugs back up at night to keep them protected. The one thing you do need to be careful of with this is even if they're still sealed up or if they're not, if you start to have seedlings, and especially if they aren't cold hardy plants, if your seedlings are coming up and there's a freeze coming, it would be best to throw a blanket over the containers at night to protect them, to keep them from freezing. I found that cold hardy things, that's not a problem, but things like tomatoes and peppers, if they happen to sprout early and then you get a frost, you could potentially get damage. But the best thing is to just keep an eye on the weather and make sure that that you cover them if you need to. Speaking about tomatoes and peppers, I do usually wait to plant my tomato and pepper seeds in the jugs until February or March, just because of that reason. I don't want to suddenly get a bunch of seedlings popping up because we've had a couple 50-degree days, 60-degree days, and then we go into a freezing period again. So I will wait and not start those too soon. Okay, so some of the pitfalls or the concerns, watch the weather. If the seedlings sprout early, watch for wind. Make sure your jugs are in a place to that they won't blow around. Keep an eye on the moisture level. Condensation is good. One big thing I did one year, which was not good, is I set my jugs inside a tub of water thinking, oh, when it rains, they'll get water. Well, then I got about 2 inches of water and my seeds were floating around in there. So that is not a good idea. Better to leave the jugs not in a water collecting source. Make sure you leave the lids off of the jugs. Add holes if you happen to have a solid cover. And don't forget about drainage holes. Just sharing some of my successes. This is my vegetable garden, and all of the tomatoes and peppers that are in this garden were all started from winter sowing. I will say winter sowing is not necessarily a process to start seedlings early. It's a process to start them on time. You know, you're not necessarily going to get a tomato in June using this process, but it is a great way to get multiple types of tomato plants and pepper plants. Some of my other successes, nasturtiums did wonderfully for me. I've tried nasturtiums in the past and I never seem to get them going as well as I did with winter sowing. Poppies also did very well. I'm going to try a bunch of different kinds more this year. One thing I forgot to mention, if you do plant like a lot of seeds in a jug, and then when you go to transplant them, something like poppies, or some of the other things, what you can do is, instead of trying to pick out each individual little seedling, oftentimes what they'll say is you can cut the soil into pieces, like blocks. They call it hunk of seedling, and basically just take a hunk of the soil with all those seedlings in it and just plant those right into your garden. And that works out pretty well, especially for the very small seedlings that you've started. The wave petunias and lobelias did wonderfully last year. And one of my absolute favorites I tried last year for the first time, Anna's Hyssop, did just so well, and the pollinators loved it. It did well on my porch. It did well down in my garden. Definitely starting a whole lot more of those this year, as well as I hope that they'll come back from the plants that I planted last year. Some resources, if you want to find out more or just follow it. Facebook groups, Winter Sowers is one of the best that I found. You do need to request to be added to that group, but fill out some questions and they will probably add you in. Joe the Gardener podcast had an episode not too long ago about winter sowing. There's plenty of other gardening podcasts and probably several other Facebook groups that you can follow. These are some resources about native plants from seed. There are going to be some native plants that may do better just planting the seeds right down in the garden and not moving them around. This is not something I'm very versed on, but I am sharing this information, these websites, to perhaps let you find a little bit more information about these. And now I'm sharing these are the upcoming classes for the Virginia Cooperative Extension. Usually there's a class every Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So these are coming up. If you are interested in participating in any of these, you can send an email to the Horticultural Help Desk email there, mastergardener@pwcgov.org, and ask to be added to the registration, as well as if you have other questions to reach out. You can also use the Master Gardener email for help desk questions about horticulture. And now I will take any questions about this process.
We have a lot of great questions.
We do.
Oh,
And
boy.
actually, before we get into questions, one thing that Amy didn't talk about, because it wasn't necessarily relevant to what people are interested here, but if you are in Maryland or Northern Virginia and you are planning on reseeding your grass in the spring, now, that is today, would be an excellent time to throw grass seed out and let the snow pack on top of it. That'll give you a jump start on the spring and reduce your disease issues. Sorry.
Amy, can you show the last slide again?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let's see these questions. What's your percent success rate? Oh,
Well,
we're not holding you to this.
would say, so last year, I think I planted over 100 containers, and I probably only had about 6 that didn't get some seeds coming up in them. And to be honest, the 6 that came up were really old seed that I had in my seed stash, and decided I would just try to see what would happen. So I have pretty good success rate of getting at least some of each type of seed coming up.
Great. Options for containers, I think you covered that. Any unusual one that you want to mention that you've used successfully?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything has worked well. The one thing I did have a picture there, one that I showed, some of the blueberry containers and things like that, they have a little bit too much space in the bottom. I wouldn't necessarily recommend those, but any of the big salad containers, and just as long as you drill some holes in the top, they work pretty well.
Let's see. How do you handle if they have a deep root? And do they do okay with this method?
I have read a lot of things about, some types of plants don't like to be transplanted.
Right.
I guess I would say the best thing, if you know that's the type of plant that you're growing, I think the best thing to do is not put too many in a container. Maybe depending on the size, if you're using a milk jug, maybe put 6 in there, and then just break them off into like blocks and try not to disturb them very much. I mean, break them up almost like they were like in a small little pot, and then plant them in the garden that way. I personally haven't had, poppies is one that I keep hearing don't like to be transplanted, and I did not have a problem with that last year.
Great. Let's see. What types of veggies were the most challenging?
2 years ago, I started broccoli and cabbage, and they came up just fine. The challenging part for me was once I put them in the garden, the bugs got them. So I probably won't do those anymore. I've had very good success with all my vegetables.
Okay. And are there any, so let's see, do you have any favorites? Vegetables, probably the tomatoes, what?
Yeah, tomatoes are definitely my favorites to grow. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many different types of tomato seeds I have.
That's an impressive selection. Can you share the slide about the native plant?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
I'm trying to scroll through and see this dachshund one. I have a dachshund Jew. Does he dig them up? Okay, let's see. What about rocks at the bottom? That's not really necessary.
No, rocks at the bottom are not necessary.
And not a good idea.
No.
Okay. All right.
Because you have drainage, you're putting drainage holes in the bottom, so the water's going to come back and up and down through it, and that way.
Okay. Are they the same size? Do they catch up to ones that are, sown outside or started in alternative ways?
I believe so, yes. Especially, I can mostly compare tomatoes and peppers because that's what I historically started inside before.
Yeah.
And yeah, as long as I plant them in my garden in May, I planted them as early as like May 5th or May the 4th be with you. And as late as, Memorial Day, and I still have had good production with my tomatoes.
Oh, I hear. Your dachshund distracted you. Okay. Explain the tray of water underneath again, Amy, please. Okay,
so if I am watering my plants, if I have my jugs outside and I want to water them, I will get a bin of some sort. Could be whatever size you want, and I will fill it with about 4 inches of water, and then I'll just place the jugs down inside of it and let them sit in there for maybe 15 minutes or so, and they just absorb the water. And sorry for my phone. They just absorb the water, and that's how I water my plants.
Okay. One of the questions was planting seeds with a container with a divider in it. I don't think that's necessary. I would use separate ones. Is that what you would do?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to do that, but you can do it if you want to.
Yeah. This is a good time to experiment a little. This works, but there's some leeway in it. So have you ever done gourds, Amy?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Have you ever done gourds?
I have done, I haven't done gourds necessarily in the winter sowing jugs, but I have done pumpkins and I have done zucchini, squash. I have planted gourds directly in my garden. A lot of
I
times
think
I'll
you can
just
do
put
gourds.
those directly in my garden just because the timing works out better for them, for
And the
me.
seeds are big, easy to sow.
Yeah, yeah.
And loofahs, I know people have done those too, or direct. Let's see here, I'm just catch up here. A spray bottle for watering so the stuff doesn't get too wet. Outside, we really want it to be moist, though.
Yeah. You could use a spray bottle if you really want to, but it's going to take you a long time to do that.
Okay, here's a question about zone 3B. We're not going to hold you to this, Amy.
Ooh.
I'm pretty sure you can go to some of the winter sowing sites and get more site-specific information rather than us guessing at 3B.
Yeah, I'm zone 7A, so that's
Yeah.
what I'm used to here.
One thing about 3B and some of the other higher climate zones, make sure you're looking for short season varieties. Pay close attention to the seed catalogs, how many days to maturity, because otherwise, I mean, you can get them to start. The question is, can you get them to finish? So that look for those short season varieties.
If they're single digits, I think native seeds could certainly handle that single digits now, but again, follow what Thomas just said about the more tender crops.
Right.
What you don't want is a warm spell coming in
No.
and it sprouting up and killing it.
Well, warm spell and then a cold spell.
Right. It's not how cold it gets, it's how it gets cold, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think I got all the questions. Linda and Robin, do you see any other ones? Winter sow artichokes, anybody have experience with this for Noreen?
I have not done artichokes.
I don't see why it wouldn't be worth a try though.
Sure.
I think I winter sowed artichokes one year. I know I grew artichokes one year, and I believe that I winter sowed them, but I direct sowed them. That is, I put them where I wanted them in the garden.
Yeah, you don't want to move them.
Yeah. Speaking of that, so one thing I forgot to mention is another option that you can do is plant seeds in the garden or in the location you want them, and then cover them, say with like just the top of one of these milk jugs, like a quash. And you could try starting some things that way too and see how it goes. I haven't personally done that myself, but I don't think it would be a problem.
A question about flower you planted that attracted bees that you would plant again. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. Anise hyssop, I love, 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 love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I
And
would
they
do that one for sure.
One bit of warning about anise hyssop, though. One year in our demonstration garden, we planted it very close to some of our cucurbits, and we ran into a problem with not getting enough fertilization on our squashes and cucumbers because all the bees were going to the anise.
Yeah.
So it'll bring them in, but just be careful where you set it out in your garden.
Okay.
That's true.
Any other ones, Linda or Robin? Do you see anything I missed?
People
I think
are
you got it.
with the
Thanks.
questions.
Well, we had people from Canada and Minnesota and Sweden and everywhere. So we just really appreciate you guys coming today and offering other classes. I think the best way to find out about them is on our VCE-Prince William Facebook page, Master Gardeners Facebook page, VCE-Prince William Master Gardeners Facebook page. And the events are posted there. You can get links to registration because otherwise I'm afraid we're going to be overwhelmed on our Extension Horticulture Help Desk.
And we really welcome everybody. And we have lots of great classes that apply to all of our gardens, not just Virginia coming up. And we hope to see you again.
Yes.
And
And Amy, thank you so much. You did
thank you, Amy.
a wonderful job.
Well,
Lots of
thank you
good,
very much.
lots of good, excellent comments in the chat box.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
saw a
excellent,
couple people
excellent.
join.
Excellent, thank you.
Wait, Thomas had.
I just saw a couple people join from, it looks like Colorado area code. So this will be recorded and up on our YouTube channel, VCE-Prince William. I think we need to be a little bit clearer at this point that classes start at 11 Eastern time.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, good point. And stay warm, everybody. We see people from Texas here too.
Oh, my.
Whoa.
Oh,
So Robin, would you put that YouTube link one more time?
sure will.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy. This was really well done.
Oh, thank you
Very-
so much.
Thank you
Amy,
very
you're a
much.
pro. You're a pro.
Oh, thanks. All right. Good luck, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.